How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of In the Sand podcast. I am excited as always to have you back for another episode, and I'm just so appreciative for your faithfulness and just listening to us on a weekly basis as we continue to push and just advertise and just broadcast great content. So please like, please share, please subscribe so we can continue to produce great content and just continue to just share this great knowledge of basketball. And sometimes we branch outside of basketball and we share other sports. So I'm excited to have on Coach Stevens, such an amazing person. Just some of the things that I was looking at in my research, and the biggest thing that stood out to me was just her organizational skills that were just so amazing. And that is something that's key. And I don't think people really realize it a lot of times, but you need some of those organizational skills to help you perform as a head coach, because there are so many things that happens behind the scenes that you just don't realize that you have to do until you get that spot. And Coach and I, we were talking about that before. And we're similar in the fact that we were assistant coaches at one time in our career. And a lot of times when you are an assistant coach role, you don't realize how, and it's a cliche in the coaching world, but moving 6 feet over to that chair is so much different than being in an assistant coach's role. And so there are so many things that you constantly want to make sure you get right. But to see some of the things that Coach is doing, I'm just amazing. I've been studying her journey, and I'm excited for her to share it, but also just listen and just kind of glean from some of the great information that she has. Full of energy, very passionate. So, Coach, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you.
That's what's up, Coach. And Coach, when I was doing my research, I didn't know I was going to say doctor or coach, but I might just call you Dr. Coach.
It's just Coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. My wife just got a doctorate degree, and she said you can just, I'm still the same person. But Coach, that's an amazing. It really is to be able to do that, and maybe you get into it more. But Coach, I just want to go ahead and jump right on into it. Coach, I would love for you to share with our audience on how this game of basketball has really shaped your life, because you have a great basketball story, like a history that you have so much history in just growing up, and just take us to where basketball has brought you to right now in your career.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a basketball family, and for most of my life, I said I was never going to be a basketball coach, and you see where that ended up. Both of my parents. My dad was a high school coach, and my mom was his assistant and the junior high coach. So I grew up in a gym. I was a gym rat. I was there all the time. I played. Went on and played in college at William Carey, and I was going to law school. That was my plan. I was an English major, and I was going to go to law school, and I was not going to coach basketball because I had seen it. I had seen how hard it was and how much time it took away from your family. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. And growing up as a coach's kid was great. But when you grow up as a coach's kid, you don't ever get to leave. The game never leaves you. When everybody else goes home and their family talks about whatever else is happening, my family was still talking about what could we have done better and how could we have won the game and stuff. So that was something I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then a good friend of my parents, Bill Smith, who I had known most of my life, calls me and he says, hey, I've got this job open at East Central. I want you to come and take it. And I was like, Coach, I don't know. I'm not really interested in coaching basketball. And he was like, well, come up here, see what it's about, see if you like it. And so I started coaching there with him. I was there 2 years. I did not play community college basketball. I didn't know anything about the community college system and Mississippi Community College basketball. And I kind of got in that. And I really fell in love with that system and that level of basketball, because you're coaching college basketball, but you can have a family life and you can have a life beyond basketball. And I really liked that aspect of it. And 15 years later, here we are.
Man, Coach, that's amazing. Coach, I want to kind of go back just a little bit. If you don't mind, share a little bit about where your parents coach and just talk about their dynamic, because that's an amazing to be able to see two parents growing up together in a household, pretty much working together. There's a lot of dynamics in that. But just talk about just that, just growing up as a kid and just kind of seeing that. And as you reflect back on it now, talk about what it really did for your career now. Because like you said, at that time, you were like, I don't want to go into this. But I know probably as you reflect back, there probably was some nuggets, or as I say, there was some seeds planted that really kind of blossomed to where you are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I said, my parents coached at North Pike for the majority of their career. They were there about 18 or 19 years, and pretty much my entire life. We moved there when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So my entire life they were there. And like I said, my mom coached the junior high, and she helped my dad, and he coached the high school. Very unique in the fact that my parents have been married for 52 years. Any two people who can work together and be married that long, there's something special about that. And I'm very fortunate and very blessed because I have a support system that not everyone else necessarily has. I have two people who understand every aspect of what I'm doing, and they didn't have to recruit because they coached high school basketball, but they very much understand the high school coaching and the recruiting and things like that from both sides of it. And so again, I'm fortunate because I don't have to pick up the phone and call a mentor or call somebody Sunday afternoon after church when we eat lunch. I have two built-in people who I can ask, what do you think about this? Or how did you handle this situation? Or what would you do if you were in my shoes? So very, very fortunate to have that and to be able to ask them questions and get their insight. The flip of that is we spend a lot of time talking about the games, and sometimes I'm like, all right, guys, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about anything but basketball, anything but recruiting, because they do want to know how we're doing. And, a lot of times after the games, we talk about what we did well, what we did poorly. And sometimes it does get to be, hey, let's talk about something else. But it's so nice to have people who understand how demanding it is and how hard it is. And some people who, they get my team, they understand my kids. They know that we have kids from far off distances and stuff. So if I need someone to help take care of them, my mom and dad are always willing to do that. And that's very helpful as well.
That's amazing. And we say this all the time. It takes a village to be able to just do all of these things that we do on a consistent basis. So that's good to see. And I'm like you. My wife and I, sometimes we go to the grocery store and we butt heads on grocery shopping sometimes. So I just get the stuff and I let her pay for it. So I agree with you. If you can make it that long and doing that and an intense job like that, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me a little bit of my friends in Germantown, Dave and Jamie Glasgow. They're married and they're head coaches, head and assistant coach. And I worked with them a couple years back in like 2013 and like 2017, and they're a great couple. But it's amazing to see them coach together. So I like their story. Now, Coach, your story is unique in and of itself because some of us, like including myself, would love to be at the college level, Coach, but you kind of jumped straight into that, sort of, kind of. But talk to us about that experience and talk to us about Coach Smith, because again, Coach Smith is a great person and has a wealth of knowledge as well. So kind of just walk us through that, because you said something very key in that I really kind of wanted to glean on some more. But just talk about that part of it first.
Well, I was very fortunate because, again, I didn't know that I wanted to coach. And then I got into it and I was like, man, I really like this. I like what I'm doing. It's not like going to work every day. It's like going and it's just fun. And when Coach Smith hired me, I was 21 years old. I was fresh out of college. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew basketball, but I had never coached. I didn't know what I was doing. The kids were almost as old as I was. And so I appreciate him for giving me that opportunity so young and for teaching me so many things so young. And now, we played at East Central this year, and he told my assistant, he said, I got her started. And he's right. Without him, without that opportunity, I would not be where I am today. So very thankful for that. Very thankful for the many things that he taught me. And thankful to still have him as a friend and a mentor. Even once I had left him and I started coaching at Southwest, he was at Choctaw Central, and it was someone who I still relied on, someone we recruited as players, but someone that I knew that I could call and say, hey, Coach, what do you think about this? Or have you seen this player? Or tell me what's going on. He'll even catch me up on the gossip sometimes if I don't know what's happening in the basketball world. And sometimes he'll call me and go, hey, what have you heard about this? And so I'll tell you a funny story about Coach Smith. I don't know how well you know him. He and his wife are very opposite personality types. His wife is very bubbly, very talkative. Coach Smith is a very quiet, very to the point person.
Yes.
So my first month or two on the job, like I said, I was 21. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, man, I don't think Coach Smith likes me very much. Like, I'm doing my job, but I don't know if he likes me. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. We would go to lunch and he didn't talk very much. And it took me a long time to learn that was just kind of his personality, that he's just not a very talkative personality. And as we've gotten to know each other better, our relationship is really good, and it's grown over the years. And now it's very different when we talk, we catch up. And so just a very, like I said, at first I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. And it just took some time to get to know him,
Yeah, that is a cool story. I don't know him personally. I've had a couple conversations with him passing in the clinics and things of that nature. But again, I guess the personality that you said, who he is kind of what you see, but you can tell deep down he has a sincere heart because he was so inviting and so warm. With that. That is a good story. And I know that had to be kind of like, ooh, like 21 years old, you're sitting here, he's not really giving you a lot. So you're probably like, man, I'm probably doing this absolutely wrong. But that's good. I know y'all probably laugh about that. When I said
we do.
Y'all do?
Yes. Very much so.
Y'all do? That's pretty cool though. It's always good to have a good mentor, someone that you can always talk to and just kind of reminisce, and they know where you came from and they know where you are, and it makes you appreciate things a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about this with Choctaw Central, and I just kind of want to I just kind of piggyback I piggyback on what you said about earlier about just his being a great coach. Choctaw Central to be a team, he always coached and they played with pace, they played with energy, and they were always in shape. And the question I kind of wanted to ask, was that always a part of who Coach Smith was, or is that more of the culture that you see in that particular area? And I'm not sure the proper term. I'm not sure if you use Native Americans or Indians and things of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to offend anyone. But just to being a part of that culture, is that a part of their culture, or did he implement that, or just talk about that? Because anybody knows when you play Choctaw Central, if your team hasn't seen a track, if your team hasn't seen a line drill, you might as well stay at the gym a long night for it.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of both. Obviously, Coach Smith is a tenured coach and a seasoned coach, and he knows how important being in shape and things like that are. But I think that's also an attribute of their culture and the way that they play basketball, the Native Americans. I mean, I don't know how much you know about them, and I'm no expert by any means, but I do have a little bit of knowledge because I've recruited them and I know Coach Smith. They start playing when they're 3 or 4 years old, and they play all the time. I mean, they play in the summer, they play in the fall, they just play all the time, and they all play that style of very up and down pressure basketball. And so it is built into their culture. And I think when Coach Smith took that job, he knew that was a part of their culture, and he knew how important that was going to be for them to win. And so he added that conditioning and that aspect to it. Again, as a player who grew up in Mississippi, we were in 3A and Choctaw Central was in 3A. So they were always the foe. My junior year of high school, we get to go up there and play in the South State tournament. It was when we still had North and South State tournaments. And so you had 5 or 6 teams that'll go up there, and you walk in the gym at Choctaw Central and it says, "Welcome to the scalping grounds." And you're like, all right, well, that's a little bit intimidating to begin with. And they're so good. And they beat us there. We advanced to the Coliseum, as did they. And they were actually the ones who put us out that year in the state tournament. Just a really good team. That was when Coach Wilson was there. Shante Frazier was a really good player on that. And same thing, they ran that up and down fast pace, and in small world. So it comes back around the summer of my junior year. The All-Star nominations were coming up. Coach Wilson and my dad were chosen to be the All-Star coaches. And, I made the All-Star team. Shante made the All-Star team. We had a couple of players from each team on there. And so we get ready to practice, and Coach Wilson's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. And so we start doing the tip drill, and it's a tip drill like I've never done it before. Like, yeah, I'm used to just tipping it up on the backboard. And he keeps backing up. And I'm like, how long are we going to do this? And so he brought that aspect of conditioning and fast pace and things into the game. And, with the All-Star game, everyone has to play so many minutes. That's part of the deal. And so at halftime, Coach Wilson, and this is a story my dad tells me all the time, he said, he looks at Coach Wilson. He's like, Coach Wilson, so-and-so, we need to play so-and-so some more and so-and-so and some more and so-and-so and some more. And he says, yeah, that's fine. We'll play them at the beginning of the third quarter, but at the end, we're fixing to play the ones that can win, because that is a part of their culture. They're so competitive and so built in to want to be those champions and things like that. So very contagious to be around as well.
That's amazing to hear, and I'm glad that you shared that, because I always thought that. I just didn't have a conversation with anybody to be able to confirm that. But you can just tell by the way they play. I love the fan base there, because maybe it's just me. I don't hear complaining a whole lot. They really just cheering on. I don't really see them getting onto the coach. That could be me missing it, but there seems to be a very rich culture. Coach, you kind of took me down memory lane. It may just be me, but I missed the North State game and the South State game. It was something about it was something about getting out of school early. You knew there was going to be three other teams in the South, the three other teams in the North that made four teams, and you knew you was going to stay the night. You knew you was going to have a good meal, but you knew that game evening was going to be amazing. And I get it for a lot of different reasons why I changed. And as I'm getting older, I realize nothing really stays the same. But for those who missed those North-South State games, they were amazing. Like, and maybe I'm stretching it, but it was almost just as exciting as the Coliseum. And
I agree completely.
For real. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone. I remember when the Coliseum was 2 weeks long. And I don't know if a lot of people remember, but it extended a long time. So I kind of wish some things would maybe go back, but I do understand it, because, again, logistics, time, money, space, arena, meeting college deadlines where individuals have to be recruited, things of that nature. I do get it, but those were some great times. So thank you for that. Let's talk about this, Coach. So talk about your transition as you leave East Central, because I really think this is where the momentum kind of really gets going for you. So talk to us about your transition from East Central and just to the next job, and then to the next stop, and then to the next stop.
So I was 2 years. I was the assistant at East Central. At the end of my second year, Coach Smith retired, and so there was a change in the coaching staff, and I ended up taking a high school job at Salem Attendance Center, which is a very small 1A school in Walthall County, Tylertown, Mississippi. Very, very small, very tight-knit community. Not much on bringing in an outsider. Again, I was fortunate. My dad had been a principal in that district after he got out of coaching. He had been a dad and a principal in that district, and so he was able to kind of help me get my foot in the door there. The girls there had not been good in a long time. They had talent, but they had the same guy coaching the girls and the boys, and they just hadn't had anybody really to care about them and stuff. And so, I'd like to say, oh, I'm just a great coach. No, I went in there and we worked hard and I cared about them. And that made a huge difference. And we weren't great, but they worked hard and they did everything I asked them to do. And we ended up winning the district championship, both the regular season district championship and the tournament championship, and made it to the playoffs, the first round of those playoffs, actually the first and second round, for the first time in many, many years that Salem had made it. So wonderful little school, wonderful opportunity for me, gave me head coaching experience. I learned very quickly in that year how lucky I was to have started my career in college coaching and how much I wanted to get back into that. I enjoyed the high school coaching. The high school teaching was challenging, as you and all other high school coaches and stuff know. We were gender grouped because we were such a small school. We had to have all the boys in one class and all the girls in the other, so that they could have PE for girls at one period or one block and PE for boys in another. And I don't know if you've ever taught a group of 7th grade boys right after recess, but that's not for the faint of heart. And trying to teach them English right after recess, they were almost the death of me. But we grew and we learned, and I probably matured more in that 1 year as a high school coach and as a teacher in that arena than I did in, many years. So I spent 1 year there, and I was uncertain at the end of the year what I was going to do. I wasn't a hard no on going back, but I wasn't excited about going back. And, things just happen, things work out. Brent Harris, who was at Southwest, had called me about his assistant job the previous year. I did not take it, and then his assistant left right at the end of the year, right at the end of my year at Salem, and it opened up. And of course, I called him back and said, "Hey, I'm interested in this. I don't know if you've got anybody else." And I was able to get that. Brent, I met him while I was at East Central. He was at Southeastern Louisiana as an assistant, and we kind of got to know each other. He was recruiting some of our players at East Central, and so I was fortunate to know him when he got the job at Southwest and be able to step in there. Of course, that was home for me. I grew up, I went to North Pike High School, and Southwest and North Pike are literally across the street from each other. So it was a really good fit for me at that time in my career. I spent 10 years with Brent as an assistant. So when I took the job here and took a head coach, I was ready for a new opportunity, obviously, but it was a little bit sad because we had been together for 10 years and we were a good team, and we still talk. We talked today, so we still talk often. So, but I was 10 years there as an assistant, and then this is obviously my first year here at Colin. I'm ending my first year here at Colin.
Coach, I like that. I'm gonna go back to the small school, going to Salem, and I think, and I really hope a lot of coaches listen to these things, because coaches say a lot of things that people going into positions need to know and need to hear. And you're absolutely correct. When you go into a small environment or a small school, especially if you're an outsider, and I know that's probably a word a lot of people hear from time to time, but that is true. When I went to Pisgah High School, Pisgah is in Sand Hills, a 2A school, but it used to be a 1A school, so it may have been about the same. I'm not sure if Salem is 2A now, but okay, so they're probably roughly about the same. And coach, I'm there, I'm giving all that I have, and I can tell that the people, the community really want to get behind me, but I feel like they're looking like, man, who are you? Like, are you here for the right reasons? Are you here because this is our school? My grandmother went here, my granddad went here, my mama taught here. Like, this is important to us. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And it almost took me about a year. And once I was there a year and I got into it, they say, Coach, we really like you and we really appreciate you, but we really wanted to make sure like this was going to be you, because so many people come into our community and leave. And so I'm glad Coach shared that, because if you do go into a small school, just understand that their school, just like everybody's school, everybody feels a certain way. But when it's a small community and the school is the main attraction, there is some loyalty and people really want you to take care of it like it's their own child. So let there be a nugget for anyone that's going into a small school, small area. Embrace the community, because then when you embrace them, they're going to put your arms around you and take care of you. So I'm glad, like I said, I told you, Coach got some good things. I'm glad that she said that, because that is true. Coach, you had me laughing. Like I wish I almost really just bust out laughing, because I'm the middle school PE teacher for boys, and my guys, when they come in for PE, Coach, no lie, they running in the bleachers, they're turning flips, they're pushing, they're fighting, they're shoving. Was playing for an hour, 20 minutes nonstop, and you know how I can get, Coach. They are so excited, and of course, when they're getting sweaty and all those different things, I often hear the math teachers and the English teachers say, "Coach, y'all must have really went hard today, because we got some interesting things going on in here." And I let y'all use y'all imagination, but I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can only imagine, because they sort of sometimes kind of work my nerves a little bit, but I can only imagine being in the classroom, because in PE we can just let them go wild, and we do all type of games.
Right.
We ultimate frisbee now, so they really getting at it. So that's funny that you said that. So man, shout out to our English teachers and math teachers and everybody who got to deal with the PE kids right after PE, especially after lunch. But that's funny, Coach. Now, Coach, before I do want to talk about this. I think it was a blessing that you was able to go to Southwest. And when I was looking at your journey, I realized that you were kind of always in the particular area where you grew up. I know Colleen is not very far from there. Of course, there's a little bit of distance, obviously, but retrospect is kind of close in that particular area. Help some people out with this question. Is it hard to go back to a place where people saw you grow up and for some reason they can't see you as an adult now? Or is it easy to make that transition? And if you say it's hard, or if it say it's easy, can you tell us why? but maybe give us a perspective, because I've heard and I've seen it a little bit in my own coaching career, that it feels like sometimes when you go back to a place where people know you, they make it a little bit more challenging than it has to be. So can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe share your experience about that before we kind of get into your Southwest journey and obviously being at Colin?
Yeah, so I didn't go to Southwest. I did not attend school there. Obviously, Macomb and Summit is a very small community. So going to high school at North Pike, I knew a lot of people who were at Southwest and things like that. My journey was not hard to be able to go back to Southwest. It was actually really rewarding. I don't know how much you know about Southwest and their basketball program, but their women's basketball program for so long was just not very good. Even when I was in high school, I would say if I play community college basketball, I'm not going to Southwest. I'm going to go to Colin. Colin was only about 45 minutes up the road, and Coach Young is a legend. And I grew up coming to camp here. We grew up coming to team camp here at Colin and everything. So the women's basketball program at Southwest had been neglected for a long time. And so when Brent got the job, it started to come back, and I was able to come in his second year, and we were really able to love it and to grow it and kind of flip that culture. And I think because I was the hometown girl and Brent was not necessarily from Macomb and didn't know as many people, I think that's one thing that made the transition easy, because when I walked in the door, I knew a lot of the faculty members. I knew a lot of the administration. I knew who to call at Coke and ask, hey, we need this, or we need your help with this. When we needed help with camp, I knew community members that were going to help us and things like that. And I think people in that area were hungry for somebody to come in and build that program and make it better. And I think that was one thing that made it an easier transition for me. I don't know this, but I think if I were to try to go back to North Pike and be the coach there in the future, I think that would be hard, because it is where you played high school and you want it to be what it was when you were growing up. And places change, they grow and they change, and it's not necessarily what you're going to be. And I think I would probably glamorize that and want it to be exactly what it was. And that's not the way that it is. So, I had a great tenure at Southwest. I'll be honest with you, that's been one of the hardest things about moving from there to Colin. I was there 10 years and I grew up in that area, and coming to Colin, it's only about 30 or 45 minutes difference. But when I took the job here, I don't know the person at the jewelry store. I don't know the Coke representative, and so that's been probably the hardest thing here, is getting to know and figuring out, who do I contact if I need this? Because I was there 10 years and I was the hometown girl. So I knew immediately, let me call when we had somebody who was having problems with their eyes. We called Dr. Barnes and he got him in. So here I've had to learn, okay, who is my contact there? And we have a great community here and we have great contacts here, but that's been the most challenging obstacle for me, just moving forward. So, the community there in Summit and at Southwest really was great to me and great to us. And you can see, if you go back and look at the history of Southwest basketball before Brent and I got there versus the past 10, 11 years, there's a huge difference in that. And so I think we did some good things there. I think we left a positive impact. Obviously, this year was hard for me because, again, those were my kids that I recruited that were playing at Southwest. And every night I wanted them to win. But then some nights I was like, man, I wish I was coaching them because they were having such a good year. And I loved my kids here. And we had a good year and we grew and everything. But that was a very hard thing. Nobody tells you that when you go from one place to another and you take another job. Nobody tells you how hard it is to leave the kids that you had gotten to know and poured your heart into, and then to come into a new group that you don't know as well and try to build a relationship with them. And that is a very hard thing to do, whether you're in junior high or high school or wherever you're at. And it takes some time. And, eventually these kids are my kids, and those kids, I want them to do well, but these are my kids. So that was a transition and it was challenging.
Coach, I don't know if anybody else is going to get anything out of this episode, but I am. And I hate to say I wish, because everything happens for a reason. But you're saying a lot of things that I dealt with leaving Pisgah. I was at Pisgah 6 years, not as long as you were there at Southwest. And then this will be the end of my second year at Richland. And Coach, you're absolutely right. When I was at Pisgah, I knew who to call. I knew where to go. I
Yeah.
had relations with elementary teachers, the principals. I can go down to the elementary. They know who I am. The kids know me. The custodians know me. Everybody knows me. And when I get to Richland, I could walk to elementary. If I don't have my badge on, coach, they may ask me who I am.
Yeah.
And that's just so different from me. Like I was talking to our junior high girls coach. Like even in the cafeteria when I was at Pisgah, coach, I was the last one. My group was the last one to eat lunch. Coach, I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast, but coach, they took care of me in the cafeteria.
Took care of you.
But now when I go, I mean, no knock to my ladies at Richland, and I'm not able to go to the cafeteria as much as I did at Pisgah. But man, they look at me like, you know what I'm saying? It's not their relationship, so it's different.
Right.
And so I'm glad that you said that. I'm hoping other coaches are listening. There is a transition period, and it's good that you said that because now I don't feel like it's just me or just something that I went through. That's a natural thing. So, coach, I thank you for that. And then, coach, and this was me too. And I shared this with my brother, my wife, and my parents. It was hard for me because at times when I saw my kids at Pisgah doing good or they were posting something on social media and maybe we wasn't doing as well. I'm like, man, I kind of missed that. Like I missed my kids.
Right.
I coached the girls and the boys. So I really had my brother and I coached that together. So we really had our hands in the whole community. And so, but you're right though. My kids now at Richland, this is ending year 2. We're much more comfortable. It feels good. But I did feel like that, coach. So, man, if you don't have nobody, coach, you helping me. So I appreciate that. I want to talk about Southwest now. One thing that I did like about Southwest, because I did coach girls at the time for the past 6 years before Richland. You always put on a great camp. Like we always wanted to go. We just never made an opportunity. So the camp was something that we always wanted to be a part of. But I'm glad you said this. I was able to watch Coach Harris play when they played Mississippi Gulf Coast at Tougaloo. Is that the Region 23 champion? Region 23 championship? Is that what it? I'm not
Championship.
sure. Okay.
Yeah, it was a championship game.
This is one thing that I was so impressed with, and I know you had a little bit of hand in this, so I'm not going to try to put too much of divide in this, but this has stood out to me about that game. I really like how Coach Harris coached the game, really enjoyed it. But the thing that stood out to me was the post play and the skill development and the skills that I saw in those post players. I want to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about the development of post players, maybe how coach does it at Southwest and how you kind of develop it, and talk about a little bit about the recruitment in there, because I know you probably had a hand in that, obviously, with kind of getting some of those players, but the post play that I saw in those young ladies was outstanding. So if you kind of just talk a little bit about that, and maybe I'm off, maybe maybe it was just a good night, but it just looked like there was some real good solid posts that you don't really see every single day, especially on the women's side and on the men's side, because it has transitioned so much to shooting the outside shot. But I was very
everybody wants to shoot it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, first let me talk about the recruiting, and then I'll talk about post development. So every year is different. Every group is different. Recruiting is the most challenging part of our job, especially when you're at a smaller place like Colin or Southwest, where our facilities aren't as nice as Gulf Coast, and they aren't as nice as, Pearl River and some of the bigger schools in our league. That's part of the deal. You can't let that hold you back, and you have to recruit. And so that class, most of his posts this year were sophomores. Morgan Sullivan and Michaela Payton, both from Moss Point. Bethany Graves, she was a freshman from Pascagoula. Morgan Sullivan and Michaela Payton, I don't know, Ethan Porter, I think he's one of the best high school basketball coaches in this state. I think he does a really, really good job. And so we recruited him. Morgan was not a kid who scored very much at all in high school, but because of her size, and players with that kind of size are so hard to find, we signed her early. Michaela was a much harder recruit and a much harder get, because everybody was chasing after her. I mean, she has long arms and the ability to rebound, which is, unprecedented. And so we really had to work hard to get her. The one thing that stood out to me about both of them is they're both really great kids who really were willing to work hard. Morgan Sullivan, her freshman year, did not play. And when I tell you did not play, played 2 or 3 minutes a game, up 20 or down 20. A kid who very easily could have given up and said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not fun. But instead, She came to practice every day. She was a great teammate. She worked hard. She got better. And in the spring, in the off season, when it was so important for her to develop, she did. She was never sour. She never got upset, and she did all the things. And again, if you look at her stat line, she didn't score very much. But if you look at her stat line, she was an unbelievable passer. She was a great rebounder, and she was a great defender. And she did what she needed to do to help them be successful. Same thing with Michaela. Much harder recruit because everybody was chasing her, and her mom. I mean, her mom is out of this world awesome, and we kind of got in there with her mom, and she was very comfortable with us and comfortable with Michaela coming to us. Very quiet kid, not a kid who is a bubbly personality or anything, and she's one you kind of had to get to know to figure out how to coach her and stuff. But once you figured it out, you knew her rebounding ability. That's not something you can teach. She just had a nose for the ball, and she went to get it. And fouling was an issue for her early in her freshman year, and that was something we constantly talked about. And I noticed this year, progressively as the season went on, she got better. So Bethany Graves was an outstanding high school post player anyway. So a lot of her skill was there. Just transitioning to the college game, the speed and the strength was a thing for her. Again, one thing I can say about all three of these kids, great people, great kids, never had to worry about them going to class. When you asked their high school coach about them, their high school coaches loved them, So those were kind of our fives, his fives this year. And then two kids who played the four, Cara Beth Addison from West Lincoln, who is an extremely skilled player who actually played point guard and played for Brent's current assistant coach Adams at West Lincoln. We signed her before I got the job here. And, the world just works in mysterious ways where she ended up going back. And then Kennedy Shelton, who was a transfer kid. She's from Shreveport, played at East Central her first 2 years, and is just very versatile. Both of them, Cara Beth and Kennedy, very versatile in the fact that they could play the four because they rebound, but they could also play the five. So we took those kids who were good high school players, but just like I do, the game is different and it transitions, and there is a development and there is a period, and it's hard to develop them in the fall. You have some time to go individuals in the fall, but we get them here in August. We start playing in the middle of October, start scrimmaging and stuff in the middle of October. So that individual skill development, really a lot of that is on them in the fall, but it really happens in the spring of their freshman year. And I can't really speak for Cara Beth and Kennedy because they weren't with me, but for Michaela and Morgan, that's when they developed, was in the spring of that freshman year. And individual workouts are slower. They're not as, some days they're not as intense. With those posts, I don't get fancy. I'm a very simple basketball coach. I like what I like. I don't like all the crazy double crossover, double step back. Like in the post, I need you to have 3 or 4 really solid moves, and I need you to be good at them. Have a move, have a counter, don't walk with it, make layups. Those are very efficient. That's what I look for. My drills in the post are not fancy. It's put your back to the basket. We're going to get a pad out. We're going to work on those moves. We did some other things with them, but those kids bought in and they spent the time that it took to really grow and be developed as players.
That's very good, Coach. And simple is a great thing. And I think sometimes, especially maybe in the social media world, we see garbage cans and we see broomsticks and we see people lighting things on fire and doing all these different things. Yeah. And sometimes we feel, or sometimes maybe our coaches getting into the game feel like that may be some of the things we have to do. And then some people say, well, y'all are so old school, add some flavor into it. I think there's a perfect mix, but I think you can't be simple because this just hit me in the game. You rarely win doing all the flash. It's really the simple things that leads to winning. And I think that is what the focus has to be, because I love a 2-ball dribble drill, but and somebody told me you only go dribble with 1 ball. So it's good to kind of implement this sometimes, but you also can kind of work on, you need to do some 1-ball dribbling as well. So I think a perfect blend of that matches, Coach. And that is a great way to be able to just implement those skills. Now, Coach, you said something, and I've always thought about this, and to me, I really didn't know how this process worked when it came to colleges, especially our junior colleges, recruiting at a small school. Now, a lot of small schools, they will say, well, they overlook us because we're small. They overlook us because we're 1A, we're a 2A school. Now, to me, I always feel like colleges, especially where Colin is located, obviously there are so many small schools in that area. That's your West Lincoln, Lloyd Star, Bogachita, all East Enterprise Lincoln. You have so many schools, and I'm imagining, Coach, that they probably lean on you all so hard. Come on, get some of our kids from your backyard. And I know at the end of the day, you don't want to look over any kid. But as I was listening to someone talk today, you have to be able to win to be able to stay here in this position of coaching that you are. So, Coach, how have you in the past and even now as a head coach, how have you, I guess, kind of worked that situation out and kind of navigated through that? Because I know it got to be a pull from your smaller schools with people who pulling on you, maybe even from the North White community as well. But how do you find that balance to let them know that we're not necessarily overlooking you all. We're still giving you an opportunity, but we do know there's some things that we are looking for to help us achieve the goal that we have.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the most challenging parts of our job, is to, number one, not overlook small school kids, because we, the St. Martins and the Biloxi's and the Starkvilles and the DeSoto Centrals, and those are 6 and 7A schools, and many times the competition at that level is better because there are more kids. There's more to draw from, but I don't ever want to be the one who looks at a kid and goes, well, you went to a 1A school. That means you can't play. That's not at all what it means. I went to a 3A school. That was not a big school. Some of the best players that we signed at Southwest were 1A kids. Tasia Jones was a 1A kid from Stringer, and nobody else really was interested in her. And she helped us win so many games. So that's a hard balance, because you have to be able to evaluate, especially when they're in that 1A school and they may be scoring 25 or 30 a night. That's great, but is the competition level the same? And it's probably not. So you have to figure out, how does that translate to when they come to us? And everybody has that kind of talent and stuff. And so what is their skill set? What is the one thing that they can bring to the table? And Tasia Jones, for example, she could not only shoot the three, but her speed was unbelievable, and she could guard really well. So she brought two things. Those were two dynamics that she brought to the table. Her left hand wasn't great, but that's something that can be developed. And that's something, so when we were evaluating her, Britt and I felt like, hey, this is something we can develop, this left hand, but she has two of the skills that we really like and we really need. So, I think for me, one of the biggest things is with our local schools is making sure that they know that you're at least giving their kids a look. My assistant and I this year, we worked really, really hard to get to at least one game that all of our local schools played in. Did that mean we were going to take a kid from our local schools? No, not necessarily, but it meant that we were doing, to me, our due diligence and watching them, and going and evaluating their kids. Anytime somebody sent us film on one, again, we went and evaluated them. And I'll be honest with you, one night this year, I went to a local game, and someone I knew looked at me and he said, Coach, why are you here? They're not very good. All they've got is young talent. And I said, I know. I said, but they're 10 minutes down the road, and it's my job to come and evaluate them so that in 3 years, when that freshman is a senior, it's not the first time Colin's walked in their gym and seen them, and so that is important to me. I want to keep our local kids at home. Unfortunately, this year we lost some local kids. Nicole Sandifer from McGee is going to Grambling. Very, very happy for her and excited for her. Obviously, we would have loved to have kept her at home. Demaya Porter from Bogachita is going to Southern University in Baton Rouge. Again, that's a kid we would have loved to have kept at home. However, those kids had bigger opportunities, and that's what they needed to take, and if there's a chance that they want to come back, our doors are open and we would love to have them. But that is an opportunity that they could not turn down. And so we want to be a school, my assistant and I, we work really hard. Alexis and I work really hard with our local schools. Hey, we want to come evaluate your players. That doesn't mean we're always going to sign them, but when you have one that's good enough, we are. And I don't care if you're 1A or 3A or 5A or, and I struggle with that, because I would like to have local kids because they put more people in the stands. However, at the end of the day, my job depends on winning and losing. And if I don't win, then I don't have a job and I can't feed my family. So it is a balance. It is a struggle. I think, and something she and I have talked about, one thing we focus on is if there's a borderline kid, if there's a kid in our district who is equivalent to a kid, let's just say from the coast or from North Mississippi, if there's 3 kids and they're all 3 about the same player, more than likely the local kid's going to get the nod. because she is right here in our backyard, and we try to do that. Is that always how it happens? No. We're lucky we'll have 2 or 3 local kids on our roster this year. Again, we're being candid. So sometimes the local kids are challenging. Sometimes the local kids have jobs or they have family obligations, and it makes it harder for them to spend as much time in the gym. Whereas the kids who are from further away, from 2 or 3 hours away, they're here all the time and they're bought in. And so sometimes that does present a challenge for those local kids. And sometimes it ends up being better for those local kids to go further away where they don't have those family conflicts and things like that. So it's an ever-changing, always challenging process.
That's a good perspective, Coach. I never thought about that part of it, about the requirements that it takes if you're right there, because you probably would still try to do the same things you were doing, like you said, when it comes to work, things of that nature. That's I never thought about that part of it. Because I always saw it, because I know when I was at Pisgah, we played Weston or Enterprise Lincoln. And I was just talking to one, like, man, they never come over to the gym. We right down the road. And I'm just thinking it all the way through. And because I never want to see things from one side. I want to be able to stand in my shoes, but also sort of stand in somebody else's shoes and kind of see where they are. And you and I'm thinking like you are when it comes to where you're trying to go. But it's good that it's your heart that you're being honest, and that's great. And it's also great that you are just trying to, leave that door open, because it does make a difference if you can really, see somebody in your backyard. Because that kid that, like you say, it's in the 9th grade, could grow up and say, hey, I remember when Coach came to the gym, and that meant a lot to me. Or even with that, if it's somebody who may want to be a manager or a coach, or grow up and just see something in you. So I think that's good that you do that, Coach. Coach, now you get the job at Colin. Very exciting. Obviously, Coach Young did an amazing job, was there a long time. And I know that probably has or maybe had to be kind of tough stepping into that, because of course he's a legend, obviously, and I want you to talk a little bit about that. But also too, you had some feet in this game. Like, you just not, as they say, a spring chicken to JUCO basketball. So you had a confidence level going in there. So talk to us about getting the job, following Coach Young. You talk about him a little bit, but then talk to us about, because you're a very humble young lady. You're very confident, but you're very serious about what you do, and you had a capability. Talk to us about how all of those merge in to where you are now at Copiah-Lincoln.
Yeah. So when I was at Southwest, and we, rumors fly in the coaching world, and there's rumors, oh, Coach Young is going to retire at the end of the year. Those rumors started flying around in, April or May, whatever they were. And I'm like, Coach Young's not going to retire. He hadn't mentioned it. And I guess I should preface this by saying, I grew up coming to camp at Colin. My mom and dad would drive me from our house to every camp Coach Young had. So I grew up in Colin's gym. I spent more time in Colin's gym growing up than I did Southwest gym. So Coach Young, I've known him forever. He's been a good friend of mine. Every job I've ever applied for, he's been a reference. So he's someone that I've known forever. When I would go recruiting, I always sat with him. He is a wealth of knowledge. I would pick with him and say, hey, next time just tell me you're going to the same game I am, and I'll pick you up on my way, and we'll just ride together and save money on each other's budgets, because he recruited all the time. So when the job comes open, there's a little bit of speculation, and I wasn't sure at first. I wasn't really sure that I wanted to apply for it, because he is a legend. No one will ever do what Coach Young did, 1,000+ wins. That won't be done in my lifetime. And so they are monumental shoes to fill. And as I was thinking about it and praying about it, I was like, someone's got to take the job, and someone's got to fill them. Yeah. As far as the location of it, obviously it was great for me because it's not terribly far. My parents are older. My dad is not in great health. So for me, it was a win, because I would have the opportunity to be a head coach, but I would still be close enough that I could help my mom and help my family and stuff. I had been with Brent for 10 years. It was, being an assistant is hard, but it's not as, there comes a time when you want to be a head coach. And so all the stars kind of aligned. and it just happened perfectly. And, I called Coach Young and what do you think about it? We talked, and, and he's awesome. When I get the job, the first thing he does is calls and congratulates me and says, how can I help you? And that's, people don't do that. People, I don't know that I would be a big enough person to do that. And that's the first thing he said is, Coach, how can I help you? What can I do to help you be successful? And so that meant so much to me to have his confidence and have his endorsement when I got the job. So got the job in July, started basically July 1, and it was a whirlwind. Honestly, the job hasn't slowed down until maybe about the last week or two. It was a complete whirlwind. The team was somewhat recruited. They had about 10 players, but when we got the job, Coach Holt and I, we still had to finish our roster. We still had to finish the schedule. Coach Young had been here 47 years, so there were some things as far as the office needed a little bit of renovating, and it needed a little bit of feminine touch, for lack of a better word. So some projects that we immediately wanted to work on, and we got some of those done, and there are some of those that we are still working on. We just got our windows outside on the gym done. We started working on that in August when we got the job, and literally just got those done about 2 weeks ago. So it has been a whirlwind. Again, moving from one chair to the other, you think, oh, well, I'm just going to be the head coach. I've done all this. And I will say, and I owe Brent a lot, there was nothing at Southwest. I was included in every decision. I was included in every time we talked about money, every time we talked about financial aid, or who are we going to sign, or what did we think, or travel. He included me in every conversation. And I'm so thankful for that, because he set me up to be able to move to the next chair and not have to look at it and go, well, I've never dealt with that. Everything that we dealt with there, I had knowledge of. And so when I took the job, it made it much, much easier. Every situation is different, and just because you have experience doesn't mean that you're going to handle every situation the same way. But when I took the job, I felt like I had the skill set to do it. I didn't feel like I was overwhelmed or drowning. So finishing the team was the first thing. We were able to get 2 transfer kids from Copiah. They were leaving. We were able to bring them in, 2 sophomores who were good kids. Without those 2, I don't know what our season looks like. We needed them so badly, their depth and their experience, and that really helped us. Got the schedule finished, worked on getting academic schedules done. And then the biggest thing was getting them here in August. And, those parents of this group put a lot of trust in me, because they sent their 18 and 19-year-old daughters to Copiah to someone who did not recruit them, to someone they had never met. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate them putting that amount of trust in me. And I appreciate this group, because, again, I didn't recruit them. Most of these kids did not know me. They met me for the first time, either when I called them or when they walked onto campus. And our first meetings were, ladies, we're going to get to know each other as the season goes on, but here's the one thing I can promise you: we're going to work. And Coach Holt and I are going to give you all the tools we can to be successful, and we are going to work. And so the first practice, come in and we throw the ball off the backboard. I'm like, all right, we're going to do rebound outlet. And Coach, they get it off the backboard and they square up the wrong way to outlet the ball. And I'm like, oh my. I said, what are we doing? And they're like, well, Coach, we're outletting the ball. And I was like, no. You got to outlet the ball to the point guard on the same side. And so the first day I came in the office and I said, Coach, we may not win a game. And we just progressively, we worked and we progressively got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And so we go to our first scrimmage at Southwest, and I appreciate Brent, because he puts me against Gulf Coast out of the gate. Yes. And I'm like, well, thanks, Brent, they're very talented, and we work great. They beat us bad, and that didn't matter, because we were trying to grow and get better and figure out who we were going to play. And in the second game, we played Jones, and we played them a little closer. And then the next scrimmage we went to, we won one, and they were like, hey, we can win. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to take time. And so we finished the season 13-13. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year that we were going to be 13-13, I would have signed the dotted line, because I just didn't know coming in so late with a team that I didn't recruit. But the amount of growth that this team made, I don't know if I've ever had a team grow as much as this team grew. And a lot of that is credit to them, because they came in every day and they worked so hard. And they, even the last week of practice, it wasn't like, man, we got to go to practice. They were still excited. They were still working hard. Even the last game, I felt like we were still getting better. And, had we had 2 or 3 more games, I do feel like that we would have continued grown. So that was encouraging and also disappointing that we didn't have 2 or 3 more games to keep getting better.
Yeah, coach, that is good, coach, especially when you can go in a season at right at 500, especially when you're walking in to a situation where, it's a little bit later than you probably would have wanted to kind of come into the situation, maybe not having the recruits that you had, and then just kind of putting it all together. So the end at 500 is pretty good, coach. I did see you all post those pictures. I love that. I love how a lot of college coaches, college programs. I know the bigger schools have been doing it, but I'm loving how those who we may not have as much money as the Alabamas and big schools as they say, or the Power Five, but it's so amazing how I see how you all take pride in your facility. Like you may not have what everybody else has. And I heard some college coach, some high school coach, someone said this, but you can make where you are some paint, some graphics, just some work, some volunteers can really change it, and that builds the pride. And coach, I love how y'all put that in the window. I'm a graphic person. Again, I'm looking forward to kind of do things at our gym at a high school level, but I just really believe that branding makes a difference for your program. Coach, all coaches have this, and it's good to kind of see it's consistent. You have those practices, and you go back in that coach's office, and you look at your assistant coach, and you look at your staff. You're like, man, what are we gonna do? And you really thinking that in your mind, like, man, what are we really gonna do? But you go home, have a meal, sleep on it, come back the next day, and the Lord bless you to have a good one. But it's funny though, we get into those offices, and we like, man, like, what are we gonna do? But it's good that you all figured it out. Coach, talk a little bit about Coach Holt, man. That did I say, is it Holt? Did I pronounce it right?
Holt, Coach Holt.
Yes, yeah, I've heard great things about her as well. Young lady in the game. Talk a little bit about her and why she's important, and why you felt she's essential to who you had to have starting off at Coach.
Yeah, so I did take the job late, and thank goodness I did not have to worry about getting an assistant. Last year was her first year, or year before last was her first year here. She was an assistant with Coach Young. And when he retired, one of the things was that she wanted to stay on. She played here at Colin. She was a really good player. In fact, she beat me several times when I was at Southwest, which I was not very happy about. But I think I may have been as happy about her wanting to stay on and be my assistant as I was about taking the job, because that took a relief off of me. It took a burden off of me, because finding an assistant is extremely challenging, especially in a situation like this where part of her job is to live in the dorm, and not everybody wants to do that. That is not a glamorous job at all, and she does it with grace and dignity, and I never hear anything about the dorm except positive things, and that's her realm, and I try to stay out of that. But I'm so thankful that she wanted to stay on. Again, she had recruited some of the kids, so she knew them. So that made the transition process for me much, much easier. But what else made it easier is she had played here. She had worked here a year. So she knew the people. She knew, hey, coach, here's how you do the travel. Here's how you do this. This first year, I would be lying to tell you it's been a tough year just because it's a new transition and things. But having her has made my year so much easier and so much better. I can't speak highly enough of her as far as she is here every day and she's ready to work, individual work, anytime they want to come shoot. If they want to shoot at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m, I've never heard her tell a kid no. And that is so valuable because she is working hard to develop our players. Recruiting is a monster, and there's not been one night when I said, hey, coach, I need you to go recruit. And sometimes I may not tell her until the day of, and she'd say, okay, coach, where do you want me to go? So that has been, she's an essential part of our success. And I could not do my job without her. And I think that her being a Colin alum makes this a special place for her because she was here when they were winning championships and stuff, and she wants to bring it back to that. And so she has a unique perspective that she can share with recruits and things like that even I don't have because I did not play here. I grew up coming to camp here, but I didn't play here. And she has that very unique perspective. She also has a unique perspective where she can connect with former players who she played with and things like that. So I'm just so thankful to have her. And I know being an assistant is a thankless job. sometimes. Sometimes she doesn't get any of the credit, and she deserves much more credit than she gets. And I tell her all the time, Alexis, I want you to stay here as long as you can. But if you stay with me for 10 years, I'm not really doing my job. I hope she does stay with me for 10 years because that makes my job a whole lot easier. But I know that one day there's going to come a time when she wants to move on and move into a head coach's role, or maybe she wants to go be a D1 assistant or something like that. And obviously I want the best for her in that. But I hope that day's a long way away because she makes my job much, much easier, and she makes our program much, much better every day.
Yeah, I'm glad you went back to that point because I wanted to touch on that when you said it with Coach Harris, that it's good for our head coaches to make sure your assistant coaches have every opportunity to be successful, every opportunity to experience everything that it takes to be a head coach, because it's already tough enough having to go into a new job, but it becomes even more challenging when you have not had an opportunity to share in experiences on the decision making that you have to make. I know obviously high school is different than in college, obviously, but even on the high school level, like you think about how do I schedule games for the summer, referees for the summer, school schedule, how do I schedule games, how do I print something at the copy machine, fax machine. So how do I do booster meetings, things of that nature. So it's good that individuals like yourself and other head coaches are giving assistant coaches the tools that they need to be successful. So, Coach, I love it. Coach, I'm going to get you out, but I want to ask you a few more questions. Coach, talk to us about this. And I know this is a major topic, so I hope it's not oversaturated, but I do want to talk about Caitlin Clark, and I want to talk about I think the well overdue recognition that women's basketball deserve. And I know that it has gotten spotlight over the time from players previously, before her, who has played the game at a high level and has accomplished, a whole lot. But for some reason, it just didn't catch fire. Caitlin Clark is selling out arenas, hasn't played a game yet. Caitlin Clark has allowed them to have, TV sponsorships, haven't played a game yet. Setting extreme records for the game. And again, like I said, hasn't touched the floor at all.
Right.
Coach, where would you like to see this go from here? Because I'm guessing you're thinking like I'm thinking. We don't want this to be a one-person show and then we go back to where it was. So, Coach, I don't know how you answer this question, but I just want to pick your brain about that, because to me, that's the most intriguing part, because I've been a fan of women's basketball, and it was funny when I was in college, we stayed in a suite, and the guy next to me, he wanted to be a women's college coach, and I never really took a whole lot of interest in the game, but we would often watch games, so I've been in love with the women's game probably since I think that was like maybe 07 or 08. I know it's not a long time, but brand has been strong for a long time. So, Coach, again, I don't know how we answer that question, but I just want to just kind of pick your brain about it.
Well, I think it's been a long time coming, and I think Caitlin Clark has been great for the game. I think she's not the only player that's been great for the game. I think Camila Cardosa and Dawn Staley, and I think there's a whole multitude of people who have been great for the game, especially in this year. She just happens to be the catalyst.
Yes.
And I think she deserves the credit that she's getting, but I think there are a lot of other players that deserve credit. I think there are a lot of players before her who deserve credit for kind of laying the foundation, those Cheryl Swoopses and that 96 Dream Team and stuff, because those were the players that I grew up watching and the players that kind of shaped who I was as a player and made me fall in love with women's basketball. So, I think those players all deserve credit. And I'm so excited for what she's doing for the game, and I hope that it doesn't fall off. I hope that it continues to go. I think the portal is kind of changing that, because we are seeing these really talented players move around, and I think people are following them and following these teams that they like. For so long, the women's basketball tournament, you would watch the March Madness for the women, and an 8 seed couldn't upset a 2 seed. For many years, that was the way it was. But this year's tournament, every game you were like, hey, this is a good game and there's a possible upset. I watched much more of the women's tournament this year than I did the men's tournament, because the games were just so much better. And I think it's very different. I like men's basketball too, but women's basketball is so different because you see there's so many different types of sets and coaching and teams. Every team plays different. You know, LSU plays a different game than Iowa plays. It's a completely different way of playing, and it's led by completely different leaders and in completely different ways. And I think that's great because I think it's something we can all relate to. We can find a player on one team or another who we relate to and who we like their game. You know, I was disappointed in the UConn game at the end, the UConn-Iowa game, that they made the call at the end of the game. It was a foul. But you hadn't called that call all night. And now you call it and you take that moment out of those great players' hands. And I think things like that hurt women's basketball. People want the players to make the plays. And it was a foul. I do not argue that. And in slow motion, it was a foul. But the more I watched it in real time, I just didn't know if that needed to be called, you know, at that point in the game. And so I think moving forward, all these players who've been drafted into the WNBA, I think this is going to grow that game because for a long time, the WNBA barely made ends meet. And now Caitlin Clark's selling out arenas. And what has happened? What happens with Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso on the same team? And now they're going to be like the power post on the same team, you know, and you've got all these others, Nika Mule and those players who she was kind of a role player at UConn, but what does she do in her professional career? And so it's exciting to see, but I think without players like Sue Bird, like Dawn Staley, like Diana Taurasi, I don't think we're where we are right now in this landscape of college women's basketball.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're right. That call was the talk of social media, X. I guess you say I say Twitter sometimes still, but that was it. And that's the conversation that's always had. And you always hear everybody say it was a foul in the first quarter, a foul in the last minute. But as coaches, we realize that it changes. It's just like anything. Like, yeah, you may order a steak at 7 p.m. You right, but if you don't add anything else to it, that steak is a little bit different at 10 p.m. Like, even though it's the same steak, it's a little bit different. So, you know, it's tough. Officiating is tough. And again, I try to stay out of it, but I totally agree. It's always hard to see that because you'll just rather let it play out. And then even if you let it play out and something else happens and UConn win and somebody else may say, well, you should have called that foul. So it's tough to say, but I'm with you, Coach. I would love to be able just to see what would have happened if that foul wasn't called. It's always perfect. Yeah, and it's tough because I think about the Lakers. They lost to Denver a couple nights ago, and of course they had a 20-point lead, and of course the Lakers are upset. They said that was a foul and things of that nature. So, you know, it's a tough game to be a part of. But I like your insight about it because you do want to be able to see that. And Paige and of course Gino, you know, Coach Gino, they worked so hard as well in that moment. It was a tough call. It really was. Let me ask you this, Coach, and then I'll ask you my final question. Defense, Coach. For so long, I've always seen this. I've always seen people argue the fact that, you know, zone defense is not a good defense. A zone defense is so predictable. A zone defense is this. A zone defense is like, you know, real people don't play zone or zone makes you lazy, things of that nature. And then now you're starting to see a flip where you see a lot of people playing, even in the NBA now, like my team, the Pelicans, we play zone probably 50% of the time. And now you see people's mindsets changing a little bit. You see a matchup zone, you see a little bit of zone. Now, I don't know if people were just caught up in just, man, I'm just play man all the time because traditionally, I grew up, we always saw man. And I don't know if they didn't have enough maybe basketball knowledge or IQ about the benefits of a zone. And Coach, again, I'm guessing I kind of know your style of defense, but I kind of want to talk about it. But just talk about a little bit what you believe defensively, but also kind of talk to the zone versus the man side of it. Because at one time I was feeling like, man, if I do play zone, maybe people judge me. Or if I don't play zone, maybe people judge me because of what everybody is saying. So kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. As a player, I was not a defensive player at all. Not very good on defense, specifically in man. I was slow, and so it was hard for me to guard people. And so when I got into coaching, I thought, I'm not going to be a defensive coach. I'll never think that much about defense. I'm going to worry about how are we going to score points. I spend 10 times more time working on what defense are we going to run and how are we going to stop them from scoring points than I ever worry about how we're going to score points. I'm not hardline one way or the other. Whatever we got to do to win. If we have to play zone, we'll play zone. If we have to play man, we'll play man. If we have to play box and one, we'll play box and one. We'll press a little bit. I'm a trash defense. Whatever we've got to do to win is kind of what I am. And I think a lot of that is determined by your team and their abilities. My team this year, I love a matchup zone, but my team this year didn't have the ability to do that. We had one or two things that we were really good at doing, and we stuck to that. We were really good playing man, and we were pretty good in a 2-3 zone. We could play a little bit of 1-3-1 here and there, but that's who we were, and that's what we did. And so we stuck with that. And I think, again, every coach is different, but for me, every team is different, and you have to figure out what's the strength and what's the weakness of that team, and what's our best chance to win. And so that was us this year. And there would be some nights when I would look at coach and go, man, I don't really want to play them very much man tonight. They don't shoot it. I want to play a lot of zone. And then they come out and they hit 4 threes in the first quarter. And then immediately that has to change because we're not getting out on shooters. So immediately you have to switch. I think one of my biggest things is I don't think you can play zone defense unless you know how to play man. You've got to know how to play man. You've got to know how to close out. You've got to know how to block out before you can move on to those zone concepts and things like that. And I think it all depends. Again, I'm a very scouting report, very player personnel, a team. If it's a team that doesn't shoot it great, then we're going to play you zone. But if you start making shots, then we have to adjust. And that was one thing this team, they would look at us and go, well, coach, you said they don't shoot it. Well, the stats say they don't. But everything's an anomaly. Some nights people shoot it better than they do. And when they're having a good night shooting it, we have to adjust. It was just like us. We didn't shoot it great. And then there'd be some nights at halftime I'd look up and we'd be 6 for 10 from the three. And I'm like, well, tonight we're on tonight. So spent more time this year and probably have spent more time in my career than I ever imagined working on closeouts. Because I don't think kids, they don't do a great job of closing out. They close out on the ball, but they close out straight up. And they don't understand that people can put it on the floor and people can blow by you. So a lot of closeouts. We played a lot of 3-on-3. One of the best things that we did for our team this year is we had some injuries. We had some stuff going on. And at one point in practice, we only had about 7 or 8 players. And I looked at Coach Holt and I said, and this was September, October, I said, we can't practice. I said, we've got to find a way to practice. So she goes to the hot box, which is our rec gym. It's been called the hot box for years because it doesn't have air conditioning. Now we've gotten air conditioning. But she goes up there and I said, Coach, we need some practice players. So she goes up there and she finds us 5 guys. They're 5 of the best human beings you're ever going to meet. And they come in and we meet with them initially. And I said, guys, we need y'all to make us better. You can't date our players. You can't hurt them. You can't dunk on them. Are y'all in? And they're like, yeah, Coach, we're in. And so they came to practice 2 or 3 days a week. And Coach, they made our team. They made such a big difference in our team, on and off the floor because they became friends with our kids. And they would, at the games, they're cheering for them. And then in practice, they're making them better and they're pushing them. And like we would tell them, all right, the guys are coming today. And they're like, man, the guys are coming today. And we're like, yeah, but y'all, the guys challenge you in a way that we can't challenge each other. We could not do that. And the other thing was late in this season, and I'm getting off topic a little bit here, I'm sorry, but late in the season, we needed to save our legs. And so when the guys came, instead of us having to run all 10 of our players at one time, and now we need to work on our offense, but, great team, we need you to be on defense. Well, instead, we put our whole team on black, and now, hey, guys, we need y'all to play man-to-man defense like Northeast is going to play it. Here's what we need out of you. And we could put ours on offense, and now we could go 5, 5, and 5. And it saved our legs and it gave us more reps at what we needed the reps at. And so that, invaluable. I can't speak highly enough of how much they helped us. It was something I kind of always wanted to do at Southwest and I could never get Brent on board with it, but we brought it in and I'm not sure I'll ever coach another year without having them. And they've got to be, they've got to be the right guys. And these guys were the right guys. They were good enough to challenge us, but they knew they weren't trying out for the men's team. They just loved basketball and they loved to come in and play. And so that was a really valuable thing for us. Again, being able, and that's what I would tell our kids, if you can guard them, you can guard East Mississippi's best player, or you can guard Jones's best player because they're not going to be as fast as these guys. They're not going to be as strong. And they'd press us and we'd throw it in their hands and we'd throw it out of bounds and do it again. Let's get better at it. And so that being able to use them to help us defensively whether it was man or zone, that was a huge thing. Being able to use them to help us learn to box out, and especially box out of a zone, because I think that's one of the major pitfalls of a zone, and something that I don't like about it is it's very hard to rebound out of. It's very hard to block out. You've got to want to do it out of that zone, because they may not be standing right next to you. And so that was something that we used our guys for, and we were small, like many teams, spent a lot of time working on that. So, going back to your question, I don't know where I'm at. I'm man, I'm zone, I'm boxing one, I'm 1-3-1. It just depends on the night. I like to press. I did some things this year because we didn't score great. We had to generate offense. We would press off free throws. I've never done that. Even off the miss, I had never done that before, but we needed that, and we needed that to be able to generate offense, and it actually worked really well for us. We were small. We would play. We had a 5'7" kid who played the 4 for us some nights, especially when we wanted to press. And I'd look at my assistant, I'd look at Coach Holt, and I'd go, we're really fixing to play this 5'7" kid at the 4. And she's like, Coach, she's the best we got to press. And we put her in there, and she gave us everything she had every night. Never complained. Sometimes didn't get to take the shots, but it was just, and that was a great lineup for us. So I don't know. We did some things this year defensively that I had never done before, and I really liked. And moving forward, I think I'd like to keep. Alexis and I were talking the other day. I said, hey, Coach, what are we going to run next year? Like, I'm thinking this or I'm thinking that. And she's like, yeah, Coach, that sounds good. That sounds good. And then we both look at each other and we go, we can talk about this all we want to. We're not going to know what we're going to be able to do until they get here in August and we see them practice.
No, Coach, I like them, and I love to talk basketball, and our audience, they love it as well, and I like it, Coach. And as I'm listening to you, Coach, I can just even see just the growth that I see you just seeing yourself growing even in this position, just the way you talk about the game and just the way you think about the small nuggets of the game. Because I've always heard about the practice squad with the guys practicing with the women, but I never, and maybe I probably just didn't ask the coach, but I never heard a coach say, I've always heard we're using it for the toughness, the speed, the agility, the scouting, but I never heard the part about the legs part, and that makes sense. And I love to incorporate what other sports do. It makes me think about football. When you think about football, they got an offense and they got a defense, so they get a rest in between. But now in practice, you're kind of simulating that, where it's kind of like offense, defense, but at the same time, you're getting all the reps you need, but you're getting your rest, and then you also being to see and evaluate that. So I can just see it and hear it, just the small things that I see you just picking up as you go along the way, and I'm adding, to my notes as well. I like that. I know one of my former players, his name is Hayden Stevens. They go by Jinx, and I'm not sure if he even participated, but I know he's one of those kids that kind of played around in the gym and kind of wanted to be a part of that. But it's good you can find some guys who can really do that. I love the part you said you can't date them now, because again, and that's one thing you always see, especially when you coaching girls and boys, or just having, man, because when they break up, Coach, and I know it'd be like their world has ended. Like, we cannot have break the season. We can't.
Yeah.
But it's funny with that, Coach. Coach, it's been a great interview. I'm excited about it. This is the segment which I call the final shot, or the last shot. And this is an opportunity where I give my guests the opportunity to share anything they want. Maybe give us another gem that we can use. Give us a nugget. Maybe share some things. Whatever you have on your heart. It's just the floor is kind of open as we close the show. So, Coach, take the last shot.
Well, I guess one thing I would say, we've talked about it a couple of different times tonight, moving from one chair to the other, 6 feet over. I was really bad sometimes with Brent. I'd go, why aren't we doing this? And we need to be doing that. And we should have done that. And he'll call me every now and then and he'll go, boy, you would have yelled at me about that last year. And I'll say, it's different when you sit in this chair. So, assistants, listen to your head coach and know what they need and understand why they don't do things. And then as a head coach, don't be afraid to do those things, and sometimes look back and go, is that what I would have done as an assistant? Would I have accepted that as an assistant? So looking at both sides of it. And I think it's a unique perspective, because Alexis would get on me all year. She's like, Coach, we need to run them more. We need to run them more. They're not in shape. And I would go, yeah, you're right. You're right, Alexis. We're not in shape and we do need to run more, but we got to make it through the season, And so those things, and I would have been exactly where she was last year. I would have been telling Britt, we're not running them enough and they're not doing this and that. So have some grace for your head coaches, have some understanding for them, because it does change when you move into that other chair. And things that I worried about as an assistant, I worried about, well, what are we going to do for sophomore night, and where are we going to eat? What about t-shirts? And we need this, and so didn't turn this in, and and as the head coach, I'm worried about who we're playing tonight, how are we going to score, what defense are we going to play, and where are we going recruiting. So it does change very, very much. And those things that you worried about as an assistant, I'm not saying I don't worry about them as much, but they kind of fall to the wayside. One thing I struggle with, and I'll say this, and Coach Holt would probably back this up, I don't delegate great. I like to take care of everything. And Brent, again, he allowed me the ability to do that. And so I don't do a good job of delegating, and I should do a better job of that, because my assistant is extremely capable. And I think that's something, again, we should all self-evaluate and grow and get better every day. And that's something, if I were to say that was a weakness, that's one of my weaknesses, is because I want to take care of everything because I was so used to doing that. And I need to do a better job of delegating and giving her more leeway to do some of the things, because she is capable of doing it. I hope I'm doing a good job of, much like Brent, sharing everything that's going on in the program and setting her up to be successful. But just probably my nugget is moving from one chair to the other. It's fun and it's great, but it's challenging, and don't get discouraged, because that's been something our softball coach here, she'll come by my office every now and then and she'll say, Coach, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Remember that. And she was the national champion last year. And so her first year, she wasn't great. And I've appreciated that. I've appreciated people like that coming and encouraging me, especially my first year, because I've been doing this 15 years, but nothing really prepares you for it until you get in that chair. And so hopefully you keep growing. And, if you're not growing and learning, it's probably time to hang it up.
Coach, I love it. Just wisdom. You got so much wisdom. Like, it feels like you've been doing it a long time, and it's good that you have people around you, a good support system. And Colleen has a lot of good things going on that really is amazing. It's a very rich place when it comes to academics, and also when it comes to athletics. And I had a former women's basketball player that played with Colleen on the softball team the year before they won a championship. So it's just amazing. I hear great things about it. Coach, I know you really have blessed some people. And again, if you haven't blessed anybody else, it was me, and I'm appreciative of it. Thank you for your time. And anytime any of my coaches, especially on the college level, can jump in when they got a lot of things to do to spend the time with me on my podcast and just help grow the brand of basketball, I'm always grateful and appreciative of that. Supporters of In the Sand podcast, I always say we got to support our coaches and their programs. So let's not stop here. Let's support our Copiah-Lincoln women basketball. I say this all the time jokingly, like, they don't need your help coaching. They don't need you yelling from the stands, but an encouraging word. Maybe you support their fundraisers. Maybe they have a donation that you can do to support, because those things mean a lot. There are so many things that goes into coaching that you will never know. Coach and I will probably talk about some things off camera that we probably couldn't say on camera, because it's just a challenging job and career. But we have to carry ourselves a certain way. We have to walk a certain way. But I want people to always remember this, and this is kind of where the podcast generated from, is that we're human beings at the end of the day, and we're trying to do the best that we can on a everyday basis. And so that's what I was saying, in the Sand podcast. Obviously, when you go to the beach, you never know what you're going to find in the sand. So when you on these podcasts, you have an opportunity to listen and kind of understand who we are. And so we definitely appreciate you. So until the next episode, I look forward to hearing from you all, seeing from you all. Again, please subscribe, please share, and we will see you on the next episode.